Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pelt Music Podcast. Shortly, we will be joined by the Subways, who have just put out their first new album in 8 years, Uncertain Joys. But before then, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And of course, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you are watching or listening. Excellent. Well, welcome, Billy, to the Full Pelt Music Podcast. Obviously, absolutely delighted to have you on. Your band, The Subways, have just released your new album, Uncertain Joys, which we'll talk to you about in just a moment. But, first of all, you've just come off a takeover in London at Paper Dress Vintage, where you've taken over 3 nights, played yourself, and put on some other awesome bands. So how was that experience for you?
It was absolutely amazing, it just being part of something over an extended period, being able to curate it and book the bands that we really love. So it for us as music appreciators, it was just a joy to be part of. We all felt so proud. And then, on 2 of the evenings we were performing. So the first night was acoustic set. So we had Nicole from Lux Jury, we had the Yes Mess, and we had Lilith I. And we were so busy enjoying everybody's acoustic shows. We're like, oh yeah, I've got to go get ready. I've got to get my acoustic guitar ready. That was great. And the second day was a curated evening. We had Adult Fiction, Cat Bear, who I chose, and Arcs, who Camille chose. And we introduced the bands. We're so used to being up on stage and speaking down the microphone, but getting up on stage to just speak down the microphone without a guitar, without like roaring into a new song or anything like that, it was I went up with all these ideas of what I was going to say about Cat Bear. They messaged me on Twitter and I fell in love with their music, and I've been wanting to see them play live, but this is their first ever gig, and
Wow.
all this stuff, and it just fell out of my head. I got so nervous. But everyone was really lovely. But I didn't do a Camille. When Camille introduced Arcs, she explained about why she chose them, and all the songs that she loves. But she walked away from the microphone and then quickly ran back and went, "Oh, by the way, they're called Arcs." It was hilarious, and everyone just burst into laughter. There was just a general great jovial celebratory feeling going around. And so last night we had a young band called the Molotovs supporting, and then we played about an hour and 10 minutes interspersed with classics and new songs. And there was just a room full of people we love, and some fans and familiar faces and some new faces too. So I'm still coming down. After a gig, it takes a while for me to kind of settle down, for the adrenaline to be released and all that kind of stuff. But I woke up this morning still kind of pumped, even though like my whole body is aching, not just from like the show, because our show is quite like active. We do a lot of running around and bouncing and jumping, and I do a lot of stage diving, so I use a lot of my body. But standing and watching every single act which we did, my calves are killing me. Like just standing there, I never realized how much energy it took to just stand and watch. But yeah, a great 3 days. It's going to take me a while to get over it, but thankfully we've got a tour starting next week, so just a few days rest, let my voice rest, let my body catch up. And then I think we'll hit Leeds nicely. So
and I'm so glad you enjoyed it, because it's been a while really since you've had new music to put out there. 8 years since your last album. So obviously Uncertain Joys came out last week, it was yesterday as we speak. So wasn't it? It was yesterday as we
Friday
speak.
the 13th, which I love.
Brave decision to release on that date. Yeah, definitely. So how does it feel? How does it feel for you to get that new music out into the world?
Without wanting to sound too cliche, it sounds very surreal. As you say, it's been 8 years, and this record has been in the works for about 5 years. I started writing when I went to uni, because after our 4th record, I wrote recorded and mixed it, and then we went out and toured it. And by the time I finished the tour, I was utterly shattered. And we'd been doing it for about 15 years solid. And I decided, I really like books. I really like reading. I like literature. So I'm gonna apply to uni and go to uni for 3 years. And I broached it with Charlotte and Josh. And thankfully they were like, 3 years away from Billy, fantastic. So Charlotte had her 2 babies. Josh spent the 3 years in France with his daughter, where she lives. And they, we all experienced our respective 3 years of bliss. But yeah, I spent 3 years sort of just pulling ideas together when I briefly had the time in between writing essays about poetry and prose. And these were really interesting ideas, I think, because when I enrolled and then, started studying at university, I found myself untethered from my identity, which I'd kind of built up to that point as like a guy in a band, a songwriter, so ever since we released our first record, or, even before that, when we were writing songs, my mind had always been very analytical about music. And that's where my appreciation kind of veered towards. So when I was at uni, I was none of that. I was just a guy at a university reading books, submitting essays, and I became a music appreciator again, like when I was a kid. So I went down all these various dark alleys genrically, where otherwise I would never usually go. And I just fell in love with all these different kinds of music. I fell deeply in love with jazz quartets, particularly quartets with a clarinet. I fell in love with the clarinet, but I also became enamored with synth music. I started really getting into the 80s synth bands. And then I developed a liking for synthwave music. So I'd subscribe to all these various synthwave record labels dotted around the globe. One in Russia, one in Estonia, one over in Japan. And they'd release music, once or twice every month, compilations of these really obscure artists making this delicious synthwave music. And I got so lost in that. Like I'd swamp myself with it. And it became, a new form of bliss for me. So when it came to pulling all these various ideas that I'd written, phrases, melodies, lyrics, during my time as merely just a music appreciator, I presented Josh and Charlotte with the idea of introducing synths into our instrumentation setup. And they were more than up for it. So, that's why songs like Uncertain Joys, Love Waiting on You, Joli Coeur, and Futures came about. But we kind of pulled those ideas together and made a record, and then the pandemic stumbled upon all of us. So we're a live touring band. We love the carnivalesque experience of being on stage and losing yourself in the moment, and breaking down the barrier between the band and the audience, and getting really involved, getting hot and sweaty and screaming from the primal soul. We really missed all of that. And we decided that we weren't going to release the record unless we could be back on stage again and properly tour the album. So that meant another couple of years until we released the album. So by the time we decided on a date, we were like, it's going to be 8 years now since the last record. But hopefully people will see that, we don't release albums willy-nilly, that we only release pieces of work that we're really proud of and that we believe in. And now that it's released, after keeping it in the locker for so long, it feels like I have just released a breath of air that I've been holding in for about 8 years. So it's great. There's always a lot of tension around the release of a record, especially for me, who's very I'm inclined to bouts of depression and stress and anxiety. So when something that you believe in and you love is finally kind of sent out into the world and people start forming their opinions, as beautiful as that process is, I also find it very almost traumatizing. But I think I've dealt with this release the best I've ever dealt with any release of our 5 records. And I'm just now I had a couple of days of sort of like just sitting down and crying a little bit. Just like it's just all so overwhelming,
Yeah,
that these songs that we've worked so hard on, that we troubled ourselves over, and uh, you know, and it's all tied up with losing Josh as well, our drummer, my
yeah,
brother. He decided that he didn't want to be in the band anymore. That he's got Asperger's. He's always found being in the band a very, very strenuous task. He has heroically seen out the 15 years he spent with us, getting on stage in front of thousands of people every single night with his
yeah,
neurodivergent brain patterns and all that kind of stuff. So, when he was like, look, I just want to have my own studio, I want to make my own music and not have to get up on stage anymore. I was like, you do you, man, that's absolutely fine. And I, around that time, fell in love with the Ramonas, who are a punk rock band who initially started out doing all Ramones covers, but they're all women. And there was a drummer called Camille Phillips who I was like, she's incredible. She's great. So when Josh left, I was like, maybe I should ask Camille to join the band. And I sent her this Instagram message and she got straight back to me and was like,
oh,
yes, that
good.
would be great. So that was nice and easy. So yeah, all this baggage comes along with releasing this new record. So there have been like these periods of emotional venting of like just taking moments to breathe and process and get through it. But all in all, it's been absolutely wonderful, and everyone involved has been so helpful. They've worked so hard. I'm so proud of everybody, and our fans have been wonderful with their comments. So yeah, it's just great to, and also when you go on stage, you want people to know the songs. So finally we'll be going on stage and these aren't like brand new,
Yeah,
close to the bone performances, where there's always this like, oh god, are we doing the, is this working, can this be incorporated into our live set? All these things are running through your mind, but now like intrinsically they're part of our corpus. So I mean, we played You Kill My Call last night and it was the first time I think where it actually really worked,
yeah,
you know and it was this moment like, aha, so this is what it feels like to have the album out. Everyone was screaming the lyrics, and because it's a much slower song than we've ever released
yeah.
before. And lyrically, it's very, it's very kind of bawdy, and very naughty. And there were some wry smiles I could see in the audience. So yeah, magical. That's one word for it. I'm sorry, I spent a
Yeah.
long time explaining that, but yeah, magical is the feeling.
No, it's lovely to listen, and it's lovely to hear how excited you are and how proud you are of putting it out there, because the music industry is quite tough to navigate, and putting a new album out there, there's such a big machine that has to go behind it.
Yeah,
It's an industry I always think should be about having fun for the listener and for the artist, but certainly behind the scenes there's so much work that goes into it. And obviously for this album, as you've discussed, losing a band member, getting a new member in, the pandemic, motherhood for Charlotte,
yeah.
university for yourself. I mean, everything has been chucked at you, and you've been able to come out the other side with quite probably obviously your most eclectic collection of songs as a band that you've put out there. So how do you think that the new songs have gone down with that audience, do you say? Because it is kind of it's not a departure, it's still definitely the Subways when you listen to it, but there's
Yeah.
some extremes there that perhaps weren't there before. Yeah, how do you feel those new songs have gone down with your audience?
Thankfully, really, really well. I mean, I was really apprehensive about Charlotte putting down her bass guitar and slinking in behind the synthesizers, and what audiences would think of that. And at first there was like, ooh, but we played Uncertain Joys, Love Waiting on You last night, and you know, uh just the responses were so heartening. But it is scary, because as you say, it's kind of a departure for us. But more than anything, what we didn't want to do was lose our sense of self, lose our Subways-esque-ness, or whatever that, whatever the word would be for it. We want people to know that when they're listening to the song, that's definitely us, but at the same time that we're expanding, but not changing. So that's a big thing for us. But yeah, eclectic is something that's, I would suppose, apart from maybe All or Nothing, which is our most genrically consistent record, we've always been a bit like hop, skippy, jumpy from one genre to the next, and that's just because of like the how broad our musical tastes are. You know, I grew up on Motown music, so Smokey Robinson and the Miracles is my all-time favorite. Nirvana, Kylie Minogue, Madonna, T-Rex, AC/DC, Oasis, Foo Fighters. So taking the time to actually make way for those influences to come in was a very big thing for us, an important thing for us, and a special moment, and kind of a validation of ourselves as well, of our true selves. And at the same time, I think that it's kind of par for the course for us, because I remember when our first record came out, and a word in a quite prominent review for our first record said that it was schizophrenic, and that, you know, one day we'll find our niche. And I can just remember thinking, even way back then as like a teenager, I don't want to find a niche. No. You know, I want to be able to be an artist that's kind of, you know, bouncing around. And I think like the history and the culture of music has always been taking on something that you love and making it yours, and by virtue of it going through your own respective filters that are contingent on your own experiences in life and through music, that it inherently becomes something new. You know, it's a new piece of work, even if you're using samples. I mean, you just have to look at like the breakout of hip hop in the 80s, which was all built upon taking samples of earlier artists and doing something completely new with it, changing its genre, changing its dynamics, changing the way that it affects the listener. So when it came to playing the synths, it was always for us about like keeping the guitars in the four, keeping the beat of the drum in the four, but at the same time making space for the synths, having the synths be prominent without clouding the speakers too much. And in that sense, Charlotte put a lot of thought into her synthesizer parts. And yeah, when we played Uncertain Joys last night, we tend to play it a little groovier, a little slower on stage. And we play it just after a song called Girls and Boys from our second record, which is kind of like pseudo metal, you know, which is it was inspired by my love of Rage Against the Machine and you know, some prog rock bands like Rush. When we started playing that, it felt like people got it, because people are used to us kind of going, here's a punk song, Holiday, here's an acoustic song, Lines of Light, you know, from our first record, here's a proggy song, Somewhere. So whilst you know, we're apprehensive that Charlotte's going behind the synths, there's still part of it that's like, well, you kind of should expect it when you come to a Subway show. Thankfully people have kind of just gone with it, and that's great. You know, that reinstates our belief in the fact that, you know, people aren't stupid. You know, their musical tastes are broad as well,
of course.
And that they can accommodate shifts and changes in genre and in approach as well as any, you know, music appreciator. So it's heartening.
It is, and I love that you used the word validation earlier, because I would, another V word, I was thinking vindication, because, you know, obviously that long journey, but you say, I love when you said you wanted to keep that identity of the Subways through it, and I think you've definitely achieved that. You know, it's a fantastic album, and listeners really do need to go and listen to it if they haven't already. And ideally, you know, talk about the tough music industry, ideally go and buy a copy of it. You know, physical copy from somewhere obviously would be ideal.
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously, one of the first songs that came out from it a couple of years ago now, really, was Fight. Which is just a brilliant, you know, sort of heavy song that, you know, I certainly enjoyed when it first came out musically, but of course, you know, lyrically there's you know, some really important context behind it, and again, tough music industry, and you know, interesting that you talked about that review and obviously how they wanted to almost box you in, and it feels like, part of that big machine is you have to be pigeonholed into some genre, so that they can just stick you up on a shelf and say, yeah, here you go, here's some punk, here's some rock, whatever it may be. And a lot of bands these days, I feel, are afraid to talk about important subjects because they don't want to alienate an audience that's already competing for, between so many bands, are competing for that same audience. So, I mean, firstly, kudos to you and the band for being willing to tackle these subjects. And also the question would be, I assume that you do feel it's an important thing for you with the platform you have to tackle social injustices such as that and the others that you do.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the core reasons why I felt like I should write that song is because before I went to uni, I really wanted to have a discussion with Billy Bragg about, broaching these kinds of subjects, having been a musician that, beforehand was writing songs about I don't know, good times and relationships and friendships and all that kind of stuff. So dealing with such important subject matter was not something that I was going to take lightly. But I was also quite scared, because alienation of an audience is something that is it's something that it's an anxiety that all bands suffer at the moment, just because like retaining your core audience and being able to fill out venues and sell records just to get by, especially with the music industry in the state that it's currently in, is such an incredible challenge. It's almost like trying to find your way through a fog. But I sat down. Billy was kindly enough to sit down with me over coffee when he was writing one of his books over at the British Library in King's Cross. And I just said to him, well, firstly, I started off the conversation with, oh, you did a cover of Tracks of My Tears, didn't you? He's like, yeah, it's my all-time favorite song. I was like, it's my all-time favorite song too. It's the song that made me fall in love with music. It's the song that made me fall in love with love and unrequited love, which has always been very important subject matters for me in songs. But I said, look, that, I've become very politically minded over the last couple of years. And it's not just through necessity. It's just because, there's a huge part of my soul that believes I should be doing something. I've got the microphone. I'm up on stage. I should be using it for good, not just for good times, but for good. And I don't know how to make that transition without it feeling like, we're just crowbarring this subject matter into our corpus. And he said, don't worry about any of that. If you start worrying about how people are going to receive your stuff, you won't be able to fully express the true you. If you believe in this stuff and you feel compelled that this is something that you have to say as part of who you are, do it. Believe in it. Believe in yourself. Trust yourself. Go and write that song. And I remember just as I was saying goodbye, we were stood at the top of the stairs in that huge atrium. And he put his hand very gently on my shoulder and he said, just remember Elvis, right? Everyone told Elvis to stay out of politics. And I remember that's something that my mum always reminded me. Stay out of politics. Just write songs that your fans are going to be happy with. And I said that to him. And he said, well, actually, let me just tell you about In the Ghetto. When Elvis recorded and released In the Ghetto, he declared that he was never, ever going to release a song again that didn't have social content in it. That it was so important that he talked about that subject matter that he had to use his voice from then on. And I was like, that completely blows apart any preconceived ideas I had about writing political music, that it lumps you in with just political artists, that actually it's kind of it's something that we can and should do, and be unafraid of it simply by virtue of the subject matter being so important. I mean, if you really think about it, the world is ending, right? and I want to make sure that if I am to shuffle off this mortal coil, that I've done the very least I could possibly do to participate in the shifting of perspectives of the core audience, even if we lose them. And I remember when we first declared our solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, this was some time before we even released Fight on Facebook, and the barrage of horrid messages from dedicated fans was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And shocking, surprising more than anything, that people would be so adversely combative.
Yeah.
And it really told me that it was important that we took the time to do what we could, regardless of how many people would become combative and resist that messaging, to attempt to bridge that gap between their beliefs and ours. And I did my best to listen, and then I didn't, and then I got angry. And I just resolved to leaving the posts behind and just saying it in the songs, because that's where they're really going to hear it. That's where it's probably going to have its most powerful and efficacious impact. Because if you frame something in a non-political way, people are more receptive to it. You know, if you create a beat and a riff and a melody, then it's almost like the messaging that comes along with it lyrically, by osmosis, is something that they maybe more passively recognize.
Yeah.
That in moments of self-reflection, they realize that maybe there's something there that they should think about. And once people listen to the song, I found the same ones who were initially combative with our declaration in solidarity with Black Lives Matter came forwards and said, I disagree still, but I'm taking on the ideas because of how you framed it. And that, for me, just told me how important music really is.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter how many times you could say stuff in between songs, on stage, at a show, or on Facebook, verbally or textually. If you frame it in a song, people are always going to be a lot more receptive to the attitudes there. If only because it's accompanied with something that they can associate with on a more ready basis. So when I wrote Fight, it was after I attended a Black Lives Matter march with a mixed race friend of mine, who up to that point had been to my chagrin, a Tory. And she came out, obviously being mixed race, in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot of her Tory friends were saying the most abominable things to her online. One person even suggested that she go throw herself in the local river, and she said, I have to do something about this. I can't just say something on Facebook. I have to make myself part of this movement. And she'd never been to a march before or a protest. And obviously, because I'd been to university, and for me, a part of going to university was the protest part of it. So, you know, if there was something happening down King's Parade, defunding the oil industry as part of the university, I'd be like, yeah, with pots and pans banging away, defund, and all that kind of stuff. And she'd see that on Facebook, and she'd be like, you know, are you planning to go to this protest? I was like, hell's yeah, I'm going, but I'm going by myself. And she said, I really want to go. Can I come with you? I was like, of course you can. That'd be amazing. So she turned up, and it was her first ever protest. She'd made placards, and she's quite a timid person. And at first, she kind of had her placards hidden, and she was singing the slogans along with everybody else in Parliament Square. And I could see her confidence building. I could feel her becoming a part of this larger group and bonding with her. You know, these people that were her people, that had the same issues growing up that she had, that she could relate to. And she eventually got her placards out, and people started chanting the slogan she had on her placards. And I could see in her face, she felt known. She felt seen. She felt recognized for the first time in her life. And we, as part of the protest, we all started moving from Parliament Square, and it was after the George Floyd murder. So we were moving west towards the US Embassy in London. And she turned to me and she said, Billy, I finally feel like I have the language that speaks my experience for the first time in my entire life. And that made me so incredibly, unfathomably sad to know that my friend, up till that point, till her early 30s, her mid 30s, felt like she had never been able to even understand, let alone vocalize, how she was and how she felt and how she identified inside herself. And I just, I just started crying, and she was having the best time, and we were all having a great time, and we said goodbye. I went straight home and I picked up the guitar and I just started screaming because all these emotions were so pent up in me. I was angry for her, and upset for her. And I was upset about what people like me had made her feel. So I was like, I'm going to talk about my privilege as a white male in the Western society, and how we, even unconsciously, let alone consciously, have made our friends, our loved ones feel simply because of the color of their skin and where their descendants came from. And I'd been listening to a lot of Future of the Left as well. So Fight is very just, from the first moment to the very last moment, just a punch in the face. Wake up. It's essentially just a wake up call to everybody like me who, whether they know it or not, possesses a privilege that has to make way for these new ways of thinking about how we're affecting everybody around us, and kind of broach the history that has established those kind of societal norms. So there was some resistance to Fight, but by and large, people were just like, this is a jam, cool. And they just really liked us playing it live because it was a very, very loud song. We put it dead center of the record. We really wanted to punctuate the record with it, because some of the songs in the early part of the record are to do with my internal experience as a person, coming to terms with various things as I'm going through my life, but also with a borderline personality disorder diagnosis. And I was like, the latter part of the record is about external environmental factors and kind of what's going on with the world, online activity, friendships, relationships, how it felt walking through the streets where I grew up and how that emotionally affected me. So, the pivot for that was this really angry track that had nothing to do with anything with me, that just had everything to do with all of us. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful song lyrically, musically, and obviously really interesting to hear the journey of how it was created. And touching on social media as you did, it obviously can be used for great good, also for great evil, unfortunately. But Billy Bragg, actually, speaking of Billy, you remind me of a funny story. Actually, you talk about obviously music helping people identify with what's behind it and absorb it more. I saw Billy at a show recently, and I had one of those annoying groups talking near me, and then all of a sudden one of them pipes up and says, "Why does he always have to be so political? Why can't he just play the songs?" And I thought, have you never listened to his songs?
That's really remarkable, isn't it? I mean, it's like that tweet that somebody said about Rage Against the Machine. It's like, God, because they released something new or something came about, and they were like, "Oh, I love Rage Against the Machine, but God, I wish it weren't so political." It's like, the politics is the music. Like, it's the music is born out of the politics and their experiences as members of the Black community in America during a really turbulent time of late capitalism. Like, how do you not see it? Like, how have you missed that? It's so integral to the appreciation of their music, especially. That's incrable. But people talking at shows, that fucking winds me up, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Lordy.
Rage Against. What machine were they raging against?
Exactly. I mean, Oh, yeah,
mind
it's
boggles, doesn't it?
doesn't
Yeah,
it
it does.
just?
So going back now, uh, just before the pandemic, and then obviously after, because it was disrupted, you were celebrating Young for Eternity. So I just wanted to ask, two-pronged question really. What was it like for you to revisit that album? And obviously now, as you are about to hit the road again with new material, how does your mindset have to shift from obviously playing those older songs to these newer songs?
It was really quite scary to get on stage and play the album in song order, as it appears on the record, because for us, the CD and the live performance are two completely separate things. In our heads, we are essentially a live band, a live touring band that sometimes has to go into the studio to make records so that we can go out on tour and do the thing that we really truly love. For those two worlds to collide, to get up on stage and do the live thing, the very primal ritualistic performance that we do in tandem with following this very strict constrained pattern of how the songs appear on the record, we were dead scared about it, but it was beautiful. It was so lovely having one song roll into the next, because as you reach the end of one song, you could hear everybody or see everybody anticipate the next song. There was just this kind of like untamable anticipation, this build-up of tension that felt a little bit like theater, like somebody going to watch their favorite play and anticipating the next lines. So that in itself was just very interesting. And there were some songs that I think, after we finished touring the first record, we started writing for the second. And then what happens is you keep the best ones that you think work live from the first record, and, you intersperse those with a lot of the new tracks from the album you're promoting or touring at that time. So to go back and play songs like Somewhere that we hadn't touched since 2006 or something was really, really lovely. And it was just so nice to be reminded how great these songs were, because you do forget, and we were so young. So I think in our heads, we're like, it's the first record. It's, rough around the edges and all that kind of stuff. But we were dead precocious. We were so driven. And we put together a record at such a young age, 18, 19, 20 years old, throwing ourselves out into the world like that. And I gained a brand new respect for my younger self. But there were moments where there was this true recognition of the lyrics that I was singing. A song like Oh Yeah, we never not play it. It always has to be in the set somewhere, right? Because it was a single and it gets everyone going. It's got a great drum beat and, everyone sings along. So we've always played it live. But when we played it on the Young for Eternity tour, I was vividly reminded of those specific lyrics. These teenage years, well, they don't last. These teenage lips, they speak too fast. And I was like, I'm 35 years old singing these lyrics. Like, what am I? And it brought into sharp relief the fact that I was growing old, and that, when I was younger, that's why the title is as it is, Young Fraternity. We relished being young. We relished our youth. I definitely had a fear of time, a fear of the passing of time, of growing old, of the dissipation of things, of loss. I just wanted to immerse and swamp myself with everything exuberant and retain this sense of wonder at the world, which I don't think I've ever truly lost. I think, naturally we always acquire this certain amount of cynicism as we go on. A little bit of misanthropy is good for the soul, but at the same time I think it's really important for us to remind ourselves of how we felt when we were younger, and all the pressures and stress, but at the same time all the joys and vivacity that we were experiencing. So the Young Fraternity tour was really magical in that sense. And I think going back to playing sort of more synthesized set lists that are ready made for just playing live, and being able to play all the other songs from the newer records again was itself a relief.
Yeah.
That we weren't beholden to a track listing of a record, that we could, on just before we went on stage, go, actually no, let's swap those songs over, because I've gone out there, I've kind of got a sense of the evening, and I think this will work better before this song, or maybe this song in place of this song. So we do like being able to do that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously, the shows were fantastic. I was able to pop along to a couple, and I know that
Oh,
the
cool.
shows you're about to play are going to be really special as well. So obviously, everyone listening, if you can, obviously, find a show near you to go along to, and obviously these days that involves social media. So I'll quickly let everyone know that they can follow the Subways on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at the Subways, which should be quite easy for them to find. Quite often, when I read off the handles, there's 3 different handles to read, and yes, they're very ingenious, some of them. But yeah, easy for listeners to find the Subways. Follow the Subways, find a show to come along to. Obviously, we've got cost of living crisis. We've got all of that going on.
Yeah.
And people are having to cherry pick, what they can do. So, with your salesman hat on, Billy, why do you think, people, if they're on the fence about coming along, why should they come along to one of the shows?
Right, I'm in two minds about this, because I really do not like when bands try to hijack the narrative and make it all about themselves, which is why I despise chart battles. Right. I think one of the great things about releasing a record is that you are releasing a record amongst all your contemporaries, and I like to celebrate our contemporaries as much as I like to celebrate our own release. So I would like to say that please don't feel beholden to coming to one of our shows, but if you would like to experience some very, very loud noises, and you like to dance, you like to crowd surf, you like to get sweaty, and you want to come to a place where you can indulge in some primal screaming and stage diving or whatever, and you want to have a big old smile, then do feel free to buy a ticket and come to one of our shows. It'd be wonderful to see you there and to share the experience with you. But if you feel like you want to experience something a little more chill, then there are many other great artists out there that will be happy to take your money and lead you on a fantastic live experience. So yeah. If you feel like you've got pent up energy and you want to let that loose, come to our show.
Definitely, and that's a beautiful way of putting it, and I really do like that. And as a band, I've always felt you're one of those bands with a really good live reputation. People know that they're going to have a good time when they come along to something else. I've identified through obviously following the band from back in the old days, as it were. So not to make us sound too old,
the olden days, yeah.
I've always been impressed with the quality of the support bands you bring along, and you've got a couple that I like. Obviously, Cat Bear coming out on this run of dates with you, and also Gaffer Tape Sandy, sorry, who are from just up the road from where I'm actually. So a couple of really good bands to check out, and you've had some really good bands in the past. We touched on before we started, recording the podcast about a band called Berries that you've had out with you.
Love them.
So how much input do you have into choosing the support bands? Is this your great musical taste, coming out in the bands you take out with you?
It is. We choose every single act, and we make the executive decisions. When we're going over to tour Europe, we decided that actually we wanted to give the opportunity to local bands to support us. So we have handed over our stipulations to the promoters and said, find a great local band that fit this criteria, and the criteria is all male, all white bands. Because we feel that exploring diversity and representation is not just great for our audiences, it's great for us too. We learn so much from our support bands. We're not one of those headline bands that is condescending or patronizing. We like to think, I don't know if that's actually true, but we like to think that we can learn so much from our support bands too. And as you say, you know, we like to book great support bands. There are so many bands out there who don't want to book support acts that are too good, that will blow them off the stage. We are not afraid of that. We are happy to be blown off the stage, because if it means we go on stage and we feel like we have to up our game, that's a great thing. If we feel a little bit of fear going on stage, that's a great thing. It makes you care. Before I go on stage, I'm always nervous. I sometimes feel like I'm going to puke. Sometimes I do puke because I care about making a great night for our audiences. I care about this thing that I do before I go on stage. I'm also just kind of scared about what's going to happen. You never know. I might break an arm because I'm stupid like that, you know. I'll climb something. I might ruin the tour. Charlotte is always like, please don't climb anything too high. And I always do. And I sometimes look back at her on the stage when I'm on this balcony or whatever, and she's like, you idiot. I can see it written on her face, like, be careful. So yeah, you know, when we book support bands, we like to know that they're gonna give our crowds a great night, as well as, you know, us going on stage and making everyone dance. We want them to find a new audience, to change minds, to because you know, I remember going to gigs. One gig I can remember was going to see the D4 at the Electric Ballroom in like 2001, 2002. You know, we were just starting out with our own music, and a band called the Caesars came on and blew my mind. They became my favorite band. And there were like 3 people in the venue. You know, everyone was off out drinking and they were just going to come and watch the D4. And there was me and Charlotte at the front. And the guitarist just looked at us the whole time. And I was like, I never ever want to miss a support band ever again. You know, I made that promise to myself, because I was like, if we'd have done what everyone else did, we would have missed this band. And they've just become one of my all-time favorite bands. And thankfully we ended up making good friends with them and going on tour with them. And then we all hooked up at Les Ardents in Belgium, because a few of the members ended up forming Peter, Bjorn and John. So the support bands establish the setting. You know, they set the standard for the evening, and we like that standard to be great. And with Cat Bear and Gaffer Tape Sandy, huge fans of both bands. I've loved Gaffer Tape Sandy for some time now, and I fell in love with Cat Bear when I was at uni. I still had my personal Twitter going, and I received a DM from Cat Bear. They said, we're big fans of your band and we've just started writing our own material and we've recorded a song. Could you listen to it and let us know what you think? I was like, yeah, of course. Listen to it. It was one of the best things I've ever heard.
Nice.
So I said, this is incredible. Please keep making music. And every year since then, they've released 1 or 2 singles, and they've just been incredible. And so I approached them last year. I was like, are you guys still together? And they said, yeah, we're still together, and it's because of you, because you keep giving us these great responses. We would have quit the band ages ago, but you keep giving us these amazing responses, so we keep releasing music. I said, how would you feel about going on tour? And they were like, oh, I don't know, we've never played live before. So I decided to put them on at Paper Dress Vintage on our curated evening. Introduce them. I wanted to use the word genius, but it was their first ever gig, so I didn't want to pile on the pressure and like say, I think you know, they're geniuses, and then them walking on stage going, well, we have to be geniuses, not just do our first show, but now we have to be geniuses. I just said, I really believe in this band. I love them. I love their music. They write incredible music. Enjoy it. And they were superb. So to have Cat Bear and Gaffer Tape Sandy on tour is a real boon for us. We are so looking forward to it. And it just makes, you know, when you've got bands on tour with you that you love, it makes every day a piece of bliss. And that's really what you want to do on tour. That's what you want to do every single day, is create a space for you to be able to appreciate the beauties of life. And if you're doing that with people that you appreciate and respect and love, then, and you create an environment of like happiness and joy and appreciation, then everyone's having a good time, and touring can be a slog. So we've been on tour with bands and it's been a trial. And we've never wanted to do that for our support bands. So we always just make sure everyone feels welcome, everyone feels happy and supported, and that everyone just has a good time.
Which is always, again, the key point of music for me, either on record or especially at a show. Everyone just needs to have a good time.
That's it.
And yeah, obviously, two very key rules established, I think, in our conversation today. One, support the support acts, get down there, because you never know if you're going to be seeing the next big thing.
100%.
And don't talk during shows either.
Yeah, please. That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
there is ample time between bands to talk, and I don't want to be too prescriptive.
No.
If you want to say something to your mate, go ahead.
Yeah.
But
full-blown conversations.
Yeah, full-blown, really loud conversations when these artists are bearing their soul to you. And there's a lot at stake for them. These are very hard times for artists. Sometimes they're losing money at shows. So please just give them time. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if it's an acoustic show. That's the worst.
Especially, yeah. Because, you've not got this wall of sound to compete with. So you don't need to speak that loudly. Yeah.
Exactly. So another thing that we've been doing recently, just to bring all of our podcasts to a close over the last month or so, is we've got Independent Venue Week coming up, which I'm such a believer in getting down to see the supports, but also getting down to your local venues to see the bands that are breaking out down there. And again, the industry's so tough. It's tough for artists. It's tough for fans. It's tough for venues in particular, especially those independent ones. You don't own an independent venue in 2023 to make money. Realistically, you're doing it for the love of music. So we're just asking every band that we talk to give a shout out to their favorite independent venue or venues, and obviously, hopefully, listeners will be able to pick out a show and go down there.
Sure. Okay. There are just so many. I feel compelled to mention the Square in Harlow, which is now a pile of rubble.
Unfortunately,
and that's because of the Tory council there, and it was under the guise of the Tory government, who had systematically since 2010 been creating an environment for the arts industry where venues, fans, bands were all really, really struggling, suffering. Crew members having to quit, bands having to split up, and venues having to close. And also fans having to stop going to gigs. I remember a time when around 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, those tours, more and more, every venue you go to, oh, did you hear this venue's just shut down? There was one called the Orange Box down south. They said, this is the last gig we're ever putting on. We're closing because we simply can't do it. It really is, because the arts speaks truth to power, because it allows people to find a sense of themselves beyond the working day, beyond being just a cog in the machine to create money for these super wealthy people, that actually we are validated and challenged by the arts. And so the Tories have done this purposefully. They've gone around making sure that these social programs that are especially like arts-based, arts therapy, or Sure Start centers, where kids are brought in, and a sense of community is created from young ages. But a place like the Square, which was a youth center and a venue at the same time, a place where you could go during the day and talk to the promoters, talk to the bar staff, form friendships. And it's where I met my best friends. It's where I met my wife. It's where all my greatest days were had, and they simply couldn't continue. They were being sabotaged on a daily basis by the council, and they were being ripped apart by the lack of support from the government. So the Square was demolished so that luxury flats could be built. It's still just a pile of rubble. Nearly 7 years later, nothing has been built. And I haven't been back to Harlow in years because I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's too heartbreaking. So, you know, for Black Wax, which was the latest single off the record, I used a guitar that was built out of the bar top from the square. You know, after it was demolished, they went in and picked up the wood from the bar. This guy called Brett Halsey was doing a luthier course, built it. Murray Tor Kildson, who was a big inspiration for us, and an incredible mentor for us. He fixed the guitar up, and one of my best friends, Adam Smith, who goes by the handle of Black Wax, actually, because he loves vinyl records. He let me borrow it for the recording of this song. And so a part of the square is woven into the fabric of this record. But to actually go back to your brilliant question, I'm so sorry. I would say, picking from a hat, Stoke Sugar Mill has always been a great venue for us to play. Great people running it. The audiences are always incredible. It's this truly fantastic space in the middle of Stoke City Centre, and we've had some incredible experiences there. Not least because of the personnel that work so hard to get bands continuing to come through, and yeah, they've always got their doors open for us. So, you know, we decided to play there. But also we shot the video for the first single off our second record. We shot the video for Girls and Boys at the Stoke Sugar Mill. So there are a lot of really happy memories caught on film there for us. So it's been a long while since we last played, and we're really excited about going back. But, you know, there are countless venues on this tour that we are just so excited about going back to. And but if you can, just, you know, make the trip up to Stoke, because it's a good place.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, certainly great reputation the Sugar Mill has. And again, you know, the industry now, the cost of an arena ticket to go see a big band in an arena, you know, is just getting astronomical when you factor in travel and stuff for people as well. So, hey, listeners, you know, if you can't afford that, perhaps just head along to your local venue for a much cheaper night, and you'll probably get just as great a music and experience from that. So that'd be my message. And as we bring the podcast to a close, Billy, I always like to finish by handing over to you and saying, what would you like the last message to be?
Thank you so much. I'd just like the last message to be, wow, that's quite a responsibility.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Just tell the people that you love them. Don't hold back. Life's too short. People are too precious. Love music, enjoy music, support bands, support your fellow music appreciators. You know, as a consequence of that last fantastic question, love your local music venues, and just in a world that is in continuous entropy, try and create something.
A beautiful final message, Billy. And yeah, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with the Subways, and I hope you check out their new album, Uncertain Joys. And of course, follow the band on social media to keep up to date with everything coming from them. You can also follow Full Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt, and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast.